Welcome to the Be Magnetic podcast, where we ignite deep abundance and step into soul-led success without losing joy, freedom, or peace. This is for the woman who is bored, disconnected, and exhausted trying to win a game she doesn't want to play anymore. If your soul is calling for more flow, more ease, more magic, but you're not sure how to get there, get ready to become magnetic and create a life that is as juicy and abundant as you've always dreamed it could be. Hi, and welcome back to the Be Magnetic podcast. So excited that you're joining me today for an epic discussion. I want to discuss the question, who are you at your core? So this might be a bit more of a philosophical type of episode. So if you're rather tuned into something that's a bit more hands-on, tangible, dive into any of my other episodes. Highly recommend. I usually do a lot of tangible, hands-down conversations on here. And not that this one isn't going to be tangible. There's definitely going to be stuff that you want to walk away with. But we're going to be a little bit more philosophical today, in the sense of we really want to dive into a topic that is very special, that is very philosophical and very, let's say, difficult to grasp, right? Who are we really? That's a big question to be discussing, to be responding to. And so if you're here to really dive deep into the nitty-gritty of what this human life is all about and find out who you truly are beyond the accolades, what shapes the world that you live in, this episode is for you, and I'm excited to dive into with you. Before we get into the conversation, I wanted to read something to you, because when I was actually on a walk, when I channeled this idea for the podcast episode, I was on a walk and I was kind of contemplating what I really love to do when I'm on walks, and I was contemplating this idea of who we are and who I am and kind of how I've changed and who I've become over the years. And at the time, it's been a couple weeks now since I've had this idea for the episode. I also had a couple conversations with other people, with friends of mine, colleagues of mine, around the idea of what it's like to know who you are and to live from that. And so when I had the idea for this episode, actually such a bright channel open that I did write some things down that I wanted to read to you. And then we can kind of take it from there. I thought that was going to be a cool start to the episode. So what I channeled was a bit more around how I found out who I am and how kind of that question shaped my journey so far. So let me just read you what I channeled, and then we go into the discussion. So I was 12 years old, and honestly, I don't fully remember how it went down. I only remember my dad asking what we wanted to do for our next vacation. And the next thing I know is we booked a surf camp. I'm pretty sure I insisted that that was what I wanted to do, but it could have also been my distorted memory. All I really know is that I was on my way to catch my first wave. The moment my skin tasted the salt water and the wave gently moved me flying across the water, I knew this was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. From that moment on, surfing, the ocean, was at the root of every single decision I made in my life. My entire life design was built on this love I had for riding waves and the connection I felt to the ocean. Everything I did, for every goal I set, every dream I pursued, all of it was just a means to answer the constant call of the ocean, and that kept me drawing back. The school I visited, the places I would go on vacation, the money I saved, my degree, the training I did, all of it just served one purpose: to get me back to this place, the ocean. For almost 2 decades, my love for the ocean and longing to surf was what shaped my life's path. until it didn't anymore. It was a slow and silent process, but one day I woke up realizing that the life I once lived, the desire I once felt, has passed. It's not that I don't love the ocean anymore or that I don't like surfing anymore. I still do. It's still a really important part of my life, but the burning desire had subsided, and on its place came something else. This was hard for me to accept, and I went through a long grieving period because it was something that for so long I thought was who I am. This was the first thing I truly burned for, and it was at the root of everything I ever burned for until now. And then I realized why. Surfing, the ocean, was always just a catalyst, a portal for me to get closer to who I truly am. You know, when you're in the ocean, nothing but stillness, yet a power unimaginable surrounding you. You realize more about yourself, more than you could ever thought was possible. When I grew up, I didn't know much about manifestation, tarot, meditation, or any of these things. I always believed that there was something bigger out there that was guiding me, supporting me, and helping me realize my fullest potential. And the ocean was my way of connecting to it. It was my way of connecting with the depths of what was going on inside of me. It was my form of meditation. I can't put into words the amount of times I gave water back to the ocean in form of my tears. The happiest memories of my life were formed on a surfboard, and the most impactful lessons learned thanks to pursuing that passion and calling. But at the end of the day, it is just a tool, one of many ways to connect with myself, with spirit, with who I am at my core. The more I integrated other practices and the more I actually allowed myself to tune into my essence, the less I needed the ocean to feel that deep connection I was longing for. It will always remain my first love, and I owe a lot to it. I owe who I am today to it, but I don't need it anymore the way I used to, because now I know who I really am. And when you know who you really are, you no longer need external tools, stimulations, anything to remember you. So that was the little like channel the thoughts that I had when I was kind of contemplating this question for myself. And as you already heard, like for me, connecting with nature, in that case, like surfing and the ocean was really like my biggest catalyst for figuring out who I was. And thanks to this passion that I had, I did go on my first solo trip when I was around 19 years old. And I remember also a big part of that was like I went on this 30-hour flight to Australia, and the minute I stepped foot on the land, I knew that I had found myself. But yeah, that was really the start of the journey of like me figuring out who I really was. And there were so many kind of steps on the way, which a few I will get into in today's episode. But essentially, we all have this story of kind of like things that like a path that kind of gets us closer to who we really are. And in my opinion, we are walking this earth solely for the purpose to figure out who we really are at our core. And there's an importance, a significance in figuring out who you are. And the sooner you can do that, the better, because when you know who you are at your core, then you become unshakable. Like when you know at your core, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what is important to me. It doesn't matter what limiting beliefs come up, it doesn't matter what fears come up, it doesn't matter what someone else says or what you achieve or don't achieve for that matter, because you are so rooted, so confident, so trusting within who you really are that nothing can shake you off your grounds. And that is such a powerful thing to have in life, especially in a world that we live in where there's like so much chaos and so much distraction and so many different things that kind of take you off of that path. And so for me, thankfully, I've been able to discover who I was at a very young age. But I also know that not everyone has that privilege because their journey just looks different, right? And so I find it part of my purpose also to help people understand who they are more quickly in life so that they don't have to figure this out and go all these detours and kind of wake up to a life that they don't really live. Because essentially, also, the reason why I am living a life that I truly love is because I know myself and because I know what's important to me and I know what I want in life and the values that I have and how I picture my life. If I didn't know myself, then I could also not be designing a life that I truly desire for myself. So these are the two big reasons for why you really want to figure out who you are at your core, beyond maybe your astrology chart or your like human design or whatever, right? Beyond these things, who you are as like a spiritual, energetic being, basically, so that you can become unshakable and really pave the path that you desire for yourself in this lifetime. And a lot of people, they just like in the beginning, I mean, for me, the ocean and like surfing, it was kind of like, it was a big passion, it was a big channel and a portal for me to figure out who I was. Like, it showed me a lot of things because if I didn't have that, maybe I wouldn't have gone traveling as much and I wouldn't have had all these other experiences that kind of helped me figure out who I really am, right? I wouldn't have had so much time to contemplate and to sit with these thoughts. Of course, a part of that also comes from within me and like my personality and just, being a Sagittarius and like just being really curious about myself, life, human beings, and all of that. But it was also these tools that helped me, figure that out. And like, although I do know at my core who I am, I keep discovering new things about myself and, shedding more clarity on who I really am through tools like meditation or, yoga, things like that. But a lot of people really, I would say, even misuse tools like that, even things like plant medicine. And it's so funny because I did have a couple conversations around this with friends, and not to say that it's of any interest or significance to this conversation, but I'm not necessarily a big supporter of it. Not because I think it's something wrong, like you do you, but I do think that in many ways it's a form of distraction. It's a way of trying to cover up a connection that we are missing, right? We are getting into all these, like, even things like too many retreats or even too much travel, right? These are just ways of escaping, or trying to fill a void that we think we can't fill otherwise. And this void comes from like this connection that we are missing with ourselves because we're building lives that don't really reflect who we are at our core. And so people take plant medicine or, do excessive traveling or even excessive other things, in order to kind of fill this void that they're feeling based on the lack of connection that they have with themselves. And with plant medicine or any spiritual practice for that matter, I think it's even more tricky because these things are said to promote our connection with ourselves and helping us get downloads and figure things out. And again, I'm not saying there's something wrong with doing them, but sometimes it's counterproductive because we don't really work on the problem at our core. We don't really actually sit down and figure out who we are and like answer these questions, but we kind of put it on some plant medicine to um, bring us the answer of like who we are at our core, when in reality we already know deep down inside. We just have to shed the layers of who we are not and kind of accept who we are. But that's like another discussion. So let's dive into who you are so that maybe hopefully this will give you some insights, some food for thought that you can sit with and contemplate on so that you discover a bit more who you are at your core so that you can really truly build the life that you desire for yourself moving forward. So you at your core are an energetic, spiritual, unique frequency that you can connect to and tune into anytime you like. So we are all spiritual beings. We are all a beam of light, if you want to will so, that have incarnated into a physical body, or at least that is my opinion and what I've discovered on my journey as a human, like spiritual being in a human body walking this earth. We are energy, we are a frequency that we can connect to and embody and tap into. And that is the first practice that I really highly recommend you. And that's why things like meditation, or even for me, surfing and connecting to the ocean was so powerful. And I know, like, I've got a mentor as well for whom like hiking was a big tool because that got him connected to his unique frequency. So essentially what we want to do is we want to go in some sort of a stillness where there's no like external distractions or anything, and we want to connect to that frequency. We want to tune into our heart center, our sacral, our solar plexus chakra, and just like feel that frequency that's vibrating there, because that is part of who you truly are. Every time I feel ungrounded or disconnected with myself, I just tune into that part of myself, because and that's kind of what I discovered while I was traveling through Australia, is that I felt a certain way because I was living fully in alignment with my values and who I was, who I am at my core, and that kind of generated a really special feeling. And I noticed that every time I tune in and connect with that center, with that frequency, that energy within my body, so with myself basically, the same feeling emerges. And I used to think that I feel this way only if I live at a certain place or do certain things, but no, it's like always there. I just have to close my eyes and connect to myself, to my core frequency, in order to feel this feeling. So you will notice when you connect to that, that you will probably feel something that you felt somewhere else in your life. And you can then use it also to kind of get a better understanding of what's important to you, and what your values are and what matters, because usually you feel very connected to that energy when you're doing these things. Another aspect of who you are is that you at your core will never change, but the way you express yourself might. So this is another kind of discussion, another layer of this. But a lot of times I hear people say like, I'm going to change who I am this year, or I'm going to be someone entirely different next year. And I mean, technically it's true, but like what they refer to mostly is they will change the way they act and the way they show up, and not necessarily who they are. If at all, they become more of who they truly are, which then they align their actions and thoughts and beliefs and habits to, so that it seems to the external world that you've become someone different, but in contrary, you just became more who you are, and kind of let the way you're showing up in the world reflect that. So I do believe that our mission here on Earth is to basically unpeel the layers of the onion to get closer and closer and closer to the core of who we really are. And again, you can start this really early on, because if you think it this way, and again, a mentor of mine has said this really, really beautifully, which kind of really struck me, of like, you are incarnating as a spiritual being, as a soul, into this human form, into this body, and your soul is pure, right? When we are babies, our souls are pure, and we basically are really connected still to who we are and to our core, just that we can't express it as much because our human form doesn't allow us to, because we can't speak yet. And then as we grow older, throughout our childhood, we are being imposed all these different values, just different perspectives, and because we don't know better at the time, we just take them on as ours, and we think that now we are what our parents tell us, who we are what society tells us, and these are things that important to us, because we don't have yet learned the habit of questioning. And so then we're like 18, 19, 20, and we think we know who we are, but we don't really, because all like who we are is really just this accumulation of all the stories that people told us about who we are or who we should be. And so from there on, if we are lucky or if we're conscious, right? If you're 20 and you're listening to this, then like now you've got the choice to either pretend like you know who you are and, keep living as this version of you that society wants you to be, or you can start doing the work to unpeel these layers that you've taken on in the last 20 years, and figure out who you really are. And so that's kind of what happened to me, right? I was 19 when I started doing this work, and like I was 19 when I figured out that, okay, I'm so much more than who I thought I was. And by no means with 19 I knew completely who I was back then, but I started doing the work and I started peeling the onion. And so by 25 I had a pretty good idea who I was, and now at 30 I know with certainty who I am. And not to say that there's not going to be more layers to unpeel for me, for sure, but I at least know who I am at my core, and I can now detect all the things, that the beliefs, the habits, the stuff that I still mistake for who I am, and can like kind of release them and shift them and exchange them for something else, or just come back to my core whenever I get distracted, because I've already figured that out. But there's enough people also who do this only at like 60, 70. So this is really up to you. It's obviously a big part of how conscious you are about this, when this kind of topic arises for you in your life, if it will ever arise. But I mean, if you're listening to this episode, if you didn't know, now you know. At least now you can start. So yeah, you will never change who you are. Even if you change your habits, you just get closer to who you truly are, right? And that's the process of figuring out who you are. You're unpeeling the layers, and then you're aligning your habits, the way you're showing up externally to what you discover. It's kind of like, over the recent years, and that's why I also meant like it never really stops. I mean, I know who I am at my core, and because I've practiced connecting and reconnecting to myself for such a long time now, I realized over the last couple years that actually, like, I'm still neglecting the fact that I am a woman, and that I actually enjoy being a woman, and that I enjoy being soft. And I've still overlayered that with need to perform, need to achieve, and like overworking and stuff like that. And so coming back to that core part of who I am, I have now shifted and aligned the way I'm showing up in business, the way I'm leading in my relationship, and all these things, so that I live in integrity with being a woman and with what's important to me as a woman, which is space in my calendar and time for myself. So that's just an example of what that can look like. On another note with this is that people often say that certain things will change you, and I don't necessarily think they change you. I just think they are means to show you more of who you really are. And I do love approaching life this way, because that way you don't feel this guilt for, okay, like now I'm different, like how's everyone gonna perceive me, but like you're actually allowing certain experiences to take place, even if they're hard in the moment, because you know they're gonna take you closer to who you really are at your core. The work that especially we as women still have to do on discovering who we are at our core is owning that feminine essence. And again, this is something that I've discovered on my own journey, because while I had a pretty good idea of who I am at my core at a pretty young age, by like mid-20s, I still had to really own the fact that I'm a woman, and that I crave different things because I'm a woman. And again, I think that that is because the conditioning with that is so deeply ingrained and goes back so many thousands of years, that it's really difficult for us sometimes to really own and connect to that core essence of us being a woman. But because you're here and because you're listening to this podcast, and because you're in my world, I know that this is probably something that's really important to you as well. And I just wanted to say you and in that on this place that you totally deserve it to rewrite these patterns and to really own that part of you. And again, like it really starts with just acknowledging, okay, yeah, this is who I am. I'm a woman and I enjoy softness. I enjoy space. I enjoy doing things slow and intentional because I'm a woman, and that is who I am, and that is non-negotiable, right? That doesn't then make it like this weird trade that you need to negotiate with yourself whether to take on or not. It's just who you are, and you are perfect and divine and amazing the way you are. And then from there, we can then start, because we've really accepted that, we really embody that, and we are really empowering ourselves through who we truly are, then we can from there much easier make the shifts in our business systems and be like, okay, now I'm cutting back my work hours so that I only work 20 hours a week, or I like carve out Wednesday morning entirely so that I can go to Pilates, or things like that, right? So we can take the steps with more confidence because we're really owning who we are at our core. And we know that these decisions, these shifts that we desire in our business aren't being made from a place of, it just would be so nice if I didn't have to launch every other month. No, but we're making these knowing that, okay, launching once a year, that is coming from who I truly am. So, wow, that's so amazing, right? It's a whole different energy. And ultimately, me discussing this topic with you today is part of me trying to give you more like the tools to really be able to follow this path, and bring more of that feminine leadership and those spiritual practices in the way you're leading in business, so that eventually you can cut back on your work hours, or you can launch less and like really let that softness lead more without compromising the income that you're making. And especially when it comes to like the femininity and like the softness of being a woman, that is so underrated to be really tapping into when it comes to who we are at our core. Because from that, if we really own that, and if we really started to live more in alignment with that, whether that's living more in alignment with your cycle, living more in alignment with your with the moon phases, living more in alignment with your human design, or just with your family schedule, or with just whatever you desire, like owning that more and really building businesses from that place, that is so empowering. And I do believe truly that from that place, better work emerges than if we keep pushing through and keep forcing ourselves to sit down and do shit all the time. So I hope this conversation gave you a lot of things to contemplate. I hope it did give you new perspectives on who you are, and also I hope it gave you some actual practical tools that you can start doing right now to make the shifts in your business that you're desiring, so that eventually you can slow down more, take a step back from your business without compromising your income, because that is the goal. We never ever want to shrink our success or what we're capable of, but we want to grow it and scale it by staying more in alignment with who we are, which includes taking more time off, like working less and pushing less as well, right? Not leading from urgency, not posting all the time because we think we need to keep up with like the trends, or because if we don't post every day, the algorithm hates us. No, we want to post when we are truly inspired, and when we truly have something to say, and trust that that is enough for our income to grow. So that being said, if you want to discover how you're leading as a female business owner and what that is costing you, whether that is time or money or anything, then take the free CEO archetype quiz, which I've created specifically for you to figure out how you're leading. It's linked in the show notes below. And if you want to dive deeper into releasing the strategies and the beliefs that are blocking you from moving forward, or like simply the beliefs and the habits that are no longer aligned with the goals that you're having, then I highly recommend you to schedule a unbecoming session, which is a 2-hour private session with me. You can also find the details in the show notes below. That being said, thank you so much for tuning in today. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I really, really appreciate you. And I'll see you next time. Bye.